This is one of the craziest stories in motorsport history. A story that involves Pablo Escobar, 3 criminal brothers, the actor Paul Newman, and the 24 hours of Le Mans. It sounds like fiction, I know, but it's a true story which happened in 1979. And this story has an incredible unexpected ending. But let's go in order. Don, Bill, and Dale Whittington are 3 American brothers, originally from Texas. What the 3 of them have in common is the same passion: motorsports. A passion inherited from their father, Dick, a professional driver who raced in the USAC Championship. Of course, if they race, they are quite a wealthy family, and they have so many resources that all the 3 brothers are able to enter the racing world, and they do it in a big way. In fact, the Whittington brothers' career in major racing began in 1978, when they founded the Whittington Bros Racing, a team which they entered the 24 Hours of Le Mans that year with the Porsche 935. As you know, Le Mans is an endurance race, so every team is made of 3 drivers, and the driver of their crew are just 2 of the 3 brothers, Don and Bill, while the 3rd driver is the Austrian Franz Conrad. Qualifying is promising. Whittington Racing qualifies 17th out of 55 cars, but their first experience ends badly. They crash on lap 41 and they retire. The 3 brothers, however, they are not discouraged, and they reappear the following year at the fateful 1979 24 Hours of Le Mans, which is the core of our story, made of money, racing, and drug smuggling. This year, however, the Whittington brothers did not decide to participate with their car, but instead they decided to look on a more structured team to loan the car. So Don and Bill strike a deal with the German team Kramer, shelling out a whopping $20,000 each to race in a Porsche 935 K3. There is one thing, however, that I haven't told you yet, and that is that Don and Bill have another passion in common, which is the airplanes. Let me say, okay, why do we care? Wait for it. The 3 brothers in the 70s devoted themselves to the restoration of warplanes, and they participated in many aviation competitions. And not only that, they even set some records. The Whittington set the qualifying speed record at the 1976 Renault Air race, touching 704 kilometers an hour. So this passion for airplanes, combined with the passion for motorsports, led the Whittington brothers to purchase the racetrack of Road Atlanta in Georgia in 1979. The track at that time had the longest straights of the whole US, so what better place to hold car races and plane races? And if you drive on the simulator, do you know Road Atlanta from iRacing? Yeah, that's it, that's the same racetrack. You can recall the long straight. But the question is, why did they buy that racetrack? Well, we will find the real reason behind this investment at the end of the video. You're not gonna believe it. Fine, whatever. Back to the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The 2 brothers, Don and Bill, after paying the team Kramer, they just discovered that the 3rd driver, the German pro Klaus Ludwig, was supposed to start the race and take track first. Well, this news made the 2 brothers really angry, and so they asked the team to reverse the order. Okay, but why? The reason is simple. If Ludwig crashed in the first stint and destroyed the car, the 2 brothers wouldn't be able to drive, so they would have spent $40,000 not to race. The team bosses, however, refused to reverse the order. And people say that their answer was something like, if you want to decide the driving order, buy the car. Do you have $200,000 to buy the car? And do you know what the brothers answered? Yes, we have it. Go to our trailer, take $200,000 from the bag you find, but not a penny more. Several people recounted that day on that bag there was about $500,000 in cash. And boys, this is the 1970s. Do you have an idea about how much $500,000 was at that time? But how did the Whittington brothers had all that cash ready to use? Well, one of the quickest and most absurd negotiations in motorsport history just happened. In a few hours, the Whittington brothers became the owner of the car they paid to race a few hours before, thus gaining full decisions powers for the race. It's Saturday, June 9, 1979. And the race is about to start. In qualifying, the driver Klaus Ludwig has placed their Porsche in 3rd position. And the front row is entirely occupied by the Essex Motorsports team, which places the number 12 car, driven by Jackie X, Brian Redman, and Jürgen Barth in P2, while the number 14 car, driven by Bob Wallach and Hurley Haywood, starts from pole position. However, these two cars, they are going really fast and they are the overwhelming favorites for the win. And the reason is simple, they are driving a Group S Porsche 936. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, this car is an uncompromising prototype made just for racing, while the 935 driven by Ludwig and the Whittington brothers is a Group 5 car, which is just a modification of the road car. Maybe most of you are not history experts, but it's like comparing a nowadays LMP2 car with a GT3 car, okay? There is no way they could compete with each other. So for the two Whittington brothers, thinking of beating those two prototypes, it's like being Peter Griffin and willing to beat Usain Bolt on the 100 meters. You just can't. But the funny thing is that in the middle of the lineup, there is also the actor Paul Newman. That Paul Newman, the actor who starred in 1969 movie and future winner of 2 Academy Awards. That's the one. Yeah, that is exactly. So, at the start of the race, obviously the two Porsche 936 catch and run. The race already seems over at the start. But after a few laps, the two prototypes start to experience some problems. They begin to lose positions to the advantage of the slower Porsche 935. Incredibly, the Porsche 7 of the Whittington brothers takes the lead and begins a tough battle with the other 935s, fighting for most of the night. However, we know what Le Mans means. And the competition turns out to be an elimination race, especially because of a heavy thunderstorm that hits the track at 2 a.m. Team Jello's two cars are forced to retire. The first one retires at 4 a.m. due to an engine problem. I can't believe it. The second car in the night hits a hair. This caused enough damage to make the turbo explode at 5 a.m. In short, the Whittington brothers find themselves leading the race alone, with the second place held by the car driven by Paul Newman. Can you imagine that? Okay, but in all of this, where is Pablo Escobar? Wait for it, he's coming soon. Back to our race. The night, however, is also marked by the furious comeback of the two Porsche prototypes. Yeah, because they were able to fix their car. And considering their insane speed, catching the first position held by the Whittingtons, it's just a matter of time. But problem for Jakey X. At the first light in the morning, the Porsche 936 of Jakey X stops for a problem. But this is Le Mans, you can fix the car. So the Belgian driver manages to fix the problem, thanks to a mechanic that throws him a belt from outside the track. But this move is extremely forbidden by the rules. It gets noticed by the race commission, which at 7 a.m. disqualifies the Porsche 936 number 12. So, after the disqualification, Jakey X joins the other Porsche 936 crew. What? Yeah, that's right. Jakey X joined the other team. It was allowed at the time. So they keep racing, they keep recovering. And during their comeback, they reach the second position, overtaking Paul Newman's car. But at 8:15 a.m., they also break the engine. It seems incredible. The two most competitive cars are out of the game, and the victory seems a done deal for the Whittington brothers, which are now leading the race by 13 laps over Paul Newman's car. But problem for Don Whittington. This is Le Mans, guys. With only a few hours left in the race, the Whittington cars lose power, forcing Don Whittington to stop. He immediately finds the issue. It's very simple. The turbocharger is glowing. It's too hot. And continuing the race would mean only one thing. You will break the turbo. He also can't get help from the team, because you already saw it. He will get disqualified. So, what to do now? The turbo is unusable. It's too hot. The only way to continue the race is to cool it down. But how? Guys, these stories are so crazy that you just can't believe it. But at that point, Don Whittington brings out his Texas temperament. Not only that, and in front of an astonished audience, he decides to pee on the turbo. I mean, the turbo is hot. You need to cool it down. You need to do it by yourself. That was a desperate solution that nobody would have done, but that, in the end, worked! That's incredible! That was so good that Don Whittington was capable of cooling down the turbo just enough to get back to the pits, allowing the mechanics to fix the turbo and rejoining the race. At that moment, the other 935 Porsche, driven by Stommelen, teammate of Paul Newman, is gaining ground, aiming for the first position, and that would be the first time in history that a Hollywood actor wins Le Mans. But problem for Stommelen. I know, that was the craziest race in history. The German drivers loses precious minutes at the pit because a wheel nut got stuck. Not enough, shortly after, the car stops due to a failure. At that point, the German driver was forced to stop at the side of the track, close to the finish line, and just wait for the checker flag to cross the finish line to validate the race and finishing in second place with 299 laps. And ladies and gentlemen, the winner is Don Whittington. The Team Kramer's Porsche 935 crosses the line in first position overall with 307 laps made. The Whittington brothers thus grab a victory, becoming the first and the only ever pair of brothers in history to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Wow! So, we just discovered the incredible race of Le Mans 1979. We just discovered the role of Paul Newman, but why would the Whittington brothers be criminals? And what does the drag king Pablo Escobar has to do with the story? Well, the truth was later discovered in the second half of the 1980s, when the Whittington brothers were accused by the US authorities of many crimes. Indeed, investigations conducted by the US IRS since the 1980s led to the discovery that the major sponsors with whom the Whittington brothers race, in fact, do not exist. Subsequently, the DEA, yeah, exactly, the one you see in the TV series where they hunt the Narcos, began investigating where the money that the Whittington brothers were using to race came from. And what did they find? They were trafficking drugs. All the cash they had, which they brought to Le Mans to race, came from drug trafficking. Do you remember their passion for airplanes and the purchase of the Road Atlanta track? Well, the Whittington brothers were lending planes from a company they owned to Pablo Escobar Colombian drug cartel. And what a better place to have the planes take off and land in secret during the night than the long straight of the Road Atlanta track? Thousands of kilos of drugs imported into the USA for a turnover that it's difficult to calculate. A business that they probably had set up time before, because how else would the Whittington brothers have bought themselves the circuit? In 1986, Bill and Don Whittington are sentenced to 20 years for tax evasion, money laundering and drug smuggling, serving 5 years in prison. Dale, on the other hand, is excluded from the charges, coming across as surprisingly innocent for the facts. Apart from the criminal side, the Whittington brothers wrote the history of motorsports, since they won the 24 Hours of Le Mans of 1979, being the only two brothers in history to win such a race. But their motorsports adventure did not stop there. In fact, in the 1982 Indianapolis 500, the Whittingtons set a record that is still unbeaten today. In fact, that edition in that year was the only one in history having 3 brothers racing at the same time in the same grid. That race was also famous because just 7 cars out of 33 finished the race, and among them was Don Whittington, who started 8th and finished 6th. There also happened to be some races in NASCAR for Don and Bill, while Dale did some endurance races in the USA. And today, what happened to the Whittington brothers? Actually, only one of them is still alive. Dale, after working as a manager at the Tampa Bay Golf and Tennis Country Club, joined his brother Don, owner of the Worldjet airline, at the Fort Lauderdale airport. He was found dead at his home by his oldest son in June 14, 2003, when he was just 43 years old. Bill, on the other hand, died on a plane crash on April 23, 2021, while the only one still alive is Don, now 75, and owner of the private jet company mentioned before. Thus ends the story of the Whittington brothers, a trio who were able to attract the attention of everyone, including the law, able to achieve victories and accomplish feats that will forever remain in motorsports history.